Thank you, Dr. Radhika, for inviting me for this beautiful inaugural ceremony and for the talk that I'm going to share just in a few minutes. And I want to also express my heartfelt congratulations and gratitude to all the dignitaries here, to everyone who has shared some very insightful, valuable thoughts on the future of communications and how that's going to impact the future society, the future humanity, particularly the examples given by Uma and Dr. Artemis, and before that, the director, culture, Professor Clement, and everyone else. So, yes, in terms of my story, I'm not going to talk too much about that. It's just that I currently work at Sri Aurobindo Society as a director of a particular vertical called Bharat Shakti, which focuses on Indian culture, studies in Indian culture in the light of Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. And Sri Aurobindo Society has an MOU with Pondicherry University, and in that regard, I have done several projects, workshops, including developing and teaching a couple of courses at Department of Sociology and Center of Women's Studies in the past few years. So that's just about it. So what I thought I will do today is pose few questions and try to actually give hints to those questions in the light of Sri Aurobindo's vision or his perspective on life existence as well as its impact on communication, but particularly his sociological writings, his vision of the future of humanity and society. So, one of the things that we find, which has been hinted in through various examples already, is that we are going through what Sri Aurobindo calls as an age of transition. So this could be the best of the times or the worst of the times, depending on how we look at it. But that's the nature of the transition itself. So we are going through these major evolutionary crises, evolutionary shifts, calling for paradigm shifts in a way. And examples have been given, whether it is, we call it existential threat, nuclear war, nuclear proliferation, dangers of world war and all those kinds of things, certainly ecological crisis. So we don't need to really go about that, to talk more about what ails us, what are the crises in front of us. But in terms of the solutions, we see every day there is some new conference, new seminar, and new insights, new research coming out on how to address these challenges. And yet something seems missing. Something doesn't work. And that brings us back to the communication that Uma also talked about, how communications is one of the 3 C's that's going to determine what kind of future societies and what kind of future communities we build. So if the present is an age of reason, and if this civilizational crisis, this crisis of evolutionary character that we are facing is the product of that age of reason, it makes sense to at least logically think that there may have to be some faculty beyond reason which will have a solution to the crisis that we are facing. Because if we continue to work with the same level of consciousness which created this crisis, we are not going to find solutions. So we keep on doing seminars, we keep on writing and doing things in a different way, and yet we keep coming back to that. So what does that mean, that shift of consciousness, or that rising of consciousness in the field of communications itself? So whether it's as a field of an academic study or as a field of practice, communications, we have all agreed that it's really going to be important in terms of bringing the future. So let's just take one example. Sorry, I don't know if I pushed something here.
No, it's good.
Okay. So human unity. How do we stop wars? How do we stop conflicts? We aspire, we dream, we envision something called unity, human unity. And when the conference delegates will go to Auroville on 10th, which I'm going to miss, though I am kind of Auroville's neighbor. I live very close to Auroville. But anyway, I won't be joining the group of delegates which goes on field trip. The dream which started the experiment in human unity that's called Auroville, one thing we must understand is that it's not a mental ideal of unity that is being envisioned or that is at the foundation of this place called Auroville. It is an experiment, but it's not a mental ideal. The experiment has to be on evolution of consciousness so that the need for unity wells up from within. It's an inner psychological unity that we are talking about. Because as soon as we only bring it down to a mental idea of unity, the moment life circumstances, life's compulsions, things like diversity of opinions, even these things come in, unity can very quickly break down. So how do you synthesize a diversity of perspectives, viewpoints, approaches to existence, even approaches to life, approaches to what it means to live a meaningful, purposeful life? That unity has to be experienced from within, an inner unity. So naturally, it compels us to dig deeper into communication. How do we even speak about unity? So the three questions that I'm going to, or the 3 points that I'm going to bring up here, and with just minor hints on all three in the interest of time. Who are the people who talk about these things in these forums? We call those people intellectuals, thinkers, right? So the very first question that we need to rethink when we think of rethinking communications is, who is an intellectual? The second question is there a binary? Often, again, these things came up through the previous presentations also. Generally, there is, a group of a section in the intellectual circle which wants to conserve what is there in the past, and one which is more future oriented. Sort of, we call them conservatives and progressives. Is there a way to go beyond this binary? Because every time we have a binary, communication breaks down, nothing goes beyond. And the third thing is about if human unity, if an inner unity is the inevitable necessity of future. In fact, at one place, Sri Aurobindo, in his seminal writing called The 5 Dreams, his 5 dreams for the world, he speaks about that only human imbecility and stupidity will not be able to see that unity is the need of the future. So if unity is the need of the future society, future communities, and has to be built in with the idea of what the future governance would look like, we have to ask a tough question, which is there something beyond rationality, beyond the age of reason, which can create certain faculties, which can help us cultivate certain faculties within us, within individuals, which can throw a different light on the very practice of communication. So we can call it spirit, we can call it intuition, we can call it X, Y, Z, whatever, doesn't matter. But is there something beyond reason as a human faculty that we must cultivate within in order to go beyond the binaries, go beyond the conflicts? So very quickly, the first one. Now, there are several writings of Sri Aurobindo which actually hint on this idea of, and he makes a very important but subtle distinction between intelligence and intellect. So intelligence, most of us are gifted with, and even higher order animals are gifted with certain kinds of intelligence. But intellect, he says, is often associated with the ability to reason. But again, most people, we confuse the term intellectual. Those having intellect can be called as intellectuals. But again, he makes a further distinction that an intellectual might be one who roams freely, and this is how poetically he speaks of, who roams freely in the realm of ideas and has the capacity to express it. So he gives very specific examples actually in his conversations. So even somebody who is an economic theorist or a political theorist, can that be called an intellectual? What about somebody who makes excellent speculation in Wall Street? He's also highly intelligent. Can that person who is applying the economic theory, the finance theory, can that person also be called as a thinker or as an intellectual? Then he makes another further distinction between, is an intellectual only one? And that I think he gives the example of Bernard Shaw there. Someone who roams freely in the realm of ideas, but only applying reason as the dominant faculty? Or how about, and again, these are examples that he picks, how about someone like Tagore, who is an intellectual, but not of the reason-based kind intellect? He is more of his intellect or his intellectual self derives from faculties like vision, imagination. So yes, it's strange that it was brought up, the idea of age, end of imagination, but maybe we need to rethink that, because the moment we end imagination, we fall back into the very black and white binary kind of world of fact versus not fact. Vision, intuition, deep feeling, deep emotion. He gives another example of Chittaranjan Das, who was a lawyer, somebody whom you would not call as an intellectual. And yet he operated some of his writings, nationalistic writings at the time of Indian independence movement, came from a very deep emotional connection to his land, to his people. So that also would make him an intellectual. So if we start thinking like that, our approach to discourse also changes, because it is the intellectuals in a society, in a community, who kind of set the contours, the nature, the questions of a discourse, which then through mass media percolates down and impacts the mainstream understanding of any topic. Call it, take it human unity, peace, nuclear proliferation, whatever, what have you. So that's one thing. Another characteristic that he speaks of in terms of who is an intellectual, again building upon these examples, is maybe one who also recognizes the limits of reason. That mind or mind-based faculty like reason will only take you up to so far, and beyond that you need to cultivate, to find some other means of knowing. Because again, one has to go deeper into understanding of them. I'm so glad the spirituality is another theme in this conference, because if you go deep into writings on integral yoga or yogic psychology, even from Patanjali onwards, you'll find the study of mind is so important. The layers, the levels of mind. So reason or intellect comes at a certain level of mind. Beyond that, below that, and above that, there are many other levels of mind one can tap into. So these are some questions that one has to go deeper into if one wants to know what it really means to be a thinker who thinks right, thinker who thinks well. Then once you've thought well, you can communicate or express well. So that's just few points on the first question. The next question about the conservatives and progressives. Again, this is a binary where all the communication often breaks down, and it's certainly in the Indian polity, Indian society, it's a huge conflict that we see, and it's happening everywhere across the world as well. In that regard, again, I think about 120 years ago, a rather lesser known essay of Sri Aurobindo, which he wrote under the title Conservation and Progress, has some very insightful lessons for us. And again, we think we live in times where these problems have come up, but even 125 years ago, even during the British rule, Indian society was facing some similar kinds of situations. So it's not that we have created new problems, we just haven't addressed the problems that have existed for so long. So in that sense, typically a conservative thinker is one who has some nostalgic feeling towards the past and wants to conserve what was there in the past. A progressive is one whose vision is only directed towards future and who does not find anything worth conserving from the past. Again, Sri Aurobindo reminds us that this is a very, very limited way of understanding how existence moves or what is the true nature of existence. A true intellectual would be one who, instead of falling into these two binaries, will think of past, present, and future as one continuum, because the truth of existence, the truth of life, the deepest truth, call it divine truth, divine will, whatever name we want to give it, name doesn't matter. Whatever intelligence is behind this existence, the soul, the essence of this existence, the formless, intangible truth that is behind all the forms that we see it, that is not a static thing. That is not a static truth. It is evolving, it is gradually revealing, and it reveals through what we can untypically speak of as time spirit, as the spirit of time. And past, present, and future are nothing but clumsy, especially past and present, are clumsy attempts to what is yet to come in the future. So rather than staying stuck with what was in the past, find what was the spirit of the past, what was the essence that gave us the present that we are in. Hold on to that. Know that the outer form must change because the time has moved on. Find what is good in the present, but act in the present, but be mindful that even today, whatever you are acting on will be full of defects, will be full of errors, because you still don't have the complete truth. The complete truth may await in the future, but know that through your stumblings, through your falls, through your errors, through your mistakes, you still have to act and work toward the future, still being aware that future may still not reveal the truth. So then he gives actually very essential characteristics of a true thinker who can go beyond these binaries, beyond these polarities. And one of the things he says, that kind of a thinker will move beyond presumptuous egoism. That I know what is good for my country. I know what is good for my community. I know what is good for my family, right? Or I know what is good for myself even. No, find some other source, call it divine, call it spirit, call it inner light, call it, in integral yoga, there is another term that is often spoken of. Call it that psychic presence within, the divinity within, the inner genius within. Refer to that. Take refuge in that. Find your source of wisdom in that. And then act in the present without a presumptuous egoism. So that's another way to look at going beyond the polarities, going beyond the binaries of progressive and conservative thinker. And finally, the third thing is going beyond the age of reason. And we are in a way moving towards what Sri Aurobindo speaks of as the subjective age. And whether it is in education, in communication, in health, hence the health and wellness, the spirituality, integration of spirituality in wellness and health sector, in arts, creativity, even politics, and maybe in finance also. There is more and more acceptance of subjective truth, subjective approaches to understanding these disciplines as well. So in that regard, again, to recognize that all discourse, all communication, all debate, all discussion is essentially meaningful only if it brings us closer to the glimpse of the truth that we are seeking, and not just becomes another opportunity or another forum for me to express or to lay out my opinion. So then, if I say something, others say something, and we don't come to a synthesis, we don't come to a truth beyond what with which we started, there is no point of that discourse. So a discourse, a debate, a discussion, a communication has to take us to deeper or higher truth. It can actually be maybe a three-way expansion: widening, a deepening, and a heightening of the whatever field of knowledge, whatever topic we are discoursing in or communicating about. And in that regard, again, there have been specific guidance given in terms of how to be a part of a debate or a discussion as an objective observer, not necessarily confusing that whatever I'm saying I have bought into that argument 100%, knowing that I can distance myself from the argument that I'm putting out. So there can be many ways to look at a discussion and our participation in an act of communication that way. But I'm just going to share few very specific guidelines, or rather, where is it? Yeah. There was actually a letter somebody had written to Sri Aurobindo as to what would be the best way to participate in a discussion or an act of communication on a topic. And I'm just going to share those pointers because I think as a communicator, as a teacher, as an educator, or as a writer, I'm also sometimes not necessarily mindful of those, but it kind of acts for, as a benchmark for me, that to kind of refer to, yes, am I doing it? To what extent I'm doing it? I'll share that, and then one more last thing from the mother, and then I'll close. So these are actually six points Sri Aurobindo had mentioned as to how to be a good communicator or a good participant in a discussion, knowing that discussion is often not a truth-finding exercise. Yet, this is how you engage with it. Number 1, do not allow the impulse of speech to assert itself too much or say anything without reflection, but to speak always with a conscious control and only what is necessary and helpful. Number 2, to avoid all debate, dispute, or too animated discussion and simply say what has to be said and leave it there. There should also be no insistence that you are right and others wrong. But what is said should only be thrown in as a contribution to the consideration of the truth of the matter. Imagine a UN body discussing things like this. Peace is not a chimera anymore. Number 3, to keep the tone of speech and the wording very quiet, calm, and uninsistent. Number 4, not to mind at all if others are heated and dispute, but remain quiet and undisturbed, and you yourself speak only what can help things to be smooth again. Number 5, very important, if there is gossip about others and harsh criticism, do not join, for these things are helpful in no way and only lower the consciousness from its highest level. Rise in consciousness if you want to be a good communicator. And number 6, to avoid all that would hurt or wound others. So the point that you made about East, yes, there is truth in speaking truth kindly, not hurting others. And again, the insistence that he had in many other letters and communiques that we find from him. I mean, he was, as we were talking, Lakshya and I were talking earlier about how grand a communicator Sri Aurobindo was. The emphasis on integration, synthesizing diverse viewpoints, and knowing that the truth would still be beyond that is important. So in one very humorous sort of aphorism, he writes that if you have won a debate, what have you really won? You've actually lost a chance to widen your knowledge. So don't aim for winning the discussion or winning the debate. Rather, aim for truth, aim for widening of that knowledge. And one simple practice to do that is what comes from Sri Aurobindo's own integral yoga practice. And one can go into deeper philosophy, but there were 2 words given by his spiritual collaborator, the mother, Mira Alfasa, who is the founder of Auroville. She used a phrase called step back. Step back before you take any decision, before you speak anything. Sometimes in my own life, I have found literally stepping back is a reminder. And what do you do as a communicator, as a writer, as an educator, particularly as a communicator and educator? Sometimes I find writing gives me an opportunity to step back away from my strongly held on to opinion so that I can rethink it. So step back, but you step back within. Whether you call it psychic, whether you call it inner light, whether you call it your intuitive faculty, higher, deeper, whatever, but step back within and then come out and see if you already have a new light in which you are seeing whatever it is that you are seeing. So if this can be, I propose to this great conference that if this could be a way to rethink communication as a field of practice and also as an academic discipline, I think we would have made some progress. So with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you so much for patient listening and giving me an opportunity, Radhika ji. Thank you so much.